Welcome to Hidden Reality. In the depths of the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness, a man sat alone, freezing and starving. He wrote a final line in his diary, loaded a single bullet into his rifle, and prepared for the end. Today, we uncover the chilling true story of Carl McCunn, a tragic masterclass in what experts call the Swiss cheese model of disaster, where a series of tiny, unchecked assumptions perfectly align to create an unavoidable catastrophe.
Let's start with a number that makes this entire tragedy almost impossible to believe: 1,400. That is how many pounds of provisions wildlife photographer Carl McCunn brought with him when he was dropped at a remote, unnamed lake in March of 1981. He had more than enough food, gear, and time to comfortably survive his planned 5-month expedition.
Which brings us to a terrifying paradox. How does a man stranded with nearly 3/4 of a ton of gear slowly starve to death? It seems mathematically impossible. But to understand the unraveling of Carl McCunn, we have to look past his equipment and examine the invisible decisions that ultimately doomed him.
Part 1. The competence of Carl McCunn. It's easy to assume Carl was just another naive tourist who wandered too far into the woods, but that is entirely false. He was a 34-year-old United States Navy veteran. He stood 6'2" and had lived in Alaska for over a decade. Most importantly, he had already survived a virtually identical 5-month stint in the Brooks Range, one of the harshest environments on Earth. He arrived armed with rifles, a shotgun, and 500 rolls of film. He knew the land, and he knew the risks.
Part 2. A flawed plan. Despite his pristine survival skills, a silent countdown to his death began before he even stepped off the plane. Carl paid an air taxi to drop him off, but he didn't secure a ride back. He simply assumed his pilot friend Rory would fly out and rescue him in August. But Rory's understanding was completely different. Rory specifically told Carl he might be working in Anchorage, warning him not to depend on him for an extraction. Whether Carl misunderstood or just ignored the warning, his entire lifeline back to civilization rested on a massive, unconfirmed assumption.
In the wild, tiny mistakes compound into lethal consequences. Feeling oversupplied early on, Carl literally tossed 5 heavy boxes of shotgun shells into the river, a choice that would soon haunt him. He also set up camp far off any regular flight routes, making a chance rescue incredibly rare. And perhaps worst of all, he explicitly told his father not to worry or call the police, hoping to avoid repeating a past false alarm. His friends just assumed he had returned early and was busy working in another town. Carl had essentially told the world not to look for him.
Part 3. The tragic flyover.
August arrives. The rescue plane never comes. Just as sheer desperation sets in, a sound breaks the silence. An engine. A small plane finally appears on the horizon, flying directly toward him. Carl drops his rifle, sprints to camp, grabs his bright orange sleeping bag cover, and frantically waves it as the plane circles right over his head. For a fleeting, euphoric moment, he is saved.
But as the plane makes the second pass, hope shatters. Carl notices the aircraft has wheels, not floats. It cannot land on the water to retrieve him. Dejected, and assuming his rescue is just going to be delayed, Carl lowers the orange cover. As the plane circles a third time, he stands completely still, raises his right hand, and shakes his fist at the sky in sheer frustration.
What Carl didn't know in that exact moment would cost him his life. Later, while packing up his camp, he checked a standard survival resource card, a guide to aviation hand signals. He made a horrifying discovery. That instinctual gesture of shaking a raised fist at the plane was the official aviation signal communicating, "All okay, I do not need help."
The psychological devastation of this realization was absolute. In his 100-page diary, Carl tormented himself over this accidental gesture. He realized the one plane that finally spotted him had just been waved away. With the brutal Alaskan winter rapidly approaching, he had effectively sealed his own fate with a single tragic wave of his hand.
Part 4. The reality of survival. With the all-okay signal given, the plane vanished over the horizon. The short, forgiving summer was dying. Carl's descent into starvation was agonizing. As his rations vanished, this capable hunter resorted to scavenging scraps of hair and guts left behind by wolves. He ate the very rabbit heads he was trying to use as bait. Eventually, just to silence his painfully empty stomach, he choked down handfuls of pure salt and crushed red pepper. Finally, he resorted to eating tree bark.
The physical toll escalated at terrifying speed. By October, thick snow blanketed the landscape, and the lake froze solid. Crucially, crippling frostbite began eating away at his hands. In the wilderness, your hands are your life. Without them, he couldn't load his weapons, chop wood, or set snares. By Thanksgiving, starvation induced extreme dizziness, severe chills, and total physical exhaustion.
Inside his zipped-up tent, his mind began to unravel. His diary entries transformed from sharp hunting logistics into delirious, heartbreaking prayers. He dreamt of cheesecake. He prayed to God for a moose or for a plane to fly overhead, noting, quote, one ideally carrying some peanut butter. It is a devastating look into a human mind and body slowly shutting down.
Part 5. The final diary entries.
By December, the end was undeniable. Completely out of food, his hands destroyed by the freezing temperatures, Carl knew he could never survive a 75-mile trek through the deep snow to the nearest town. What he did next was chillingly calm. He meticulously got his affairs in order. He burned his last bit of fuel for one final warm fire. He wrote a letter to God asking for forgiveness and left precise instructions to his father on how to develop his life's work of film. He literally pinned his Alaska driver's license to his diary so his body could be easily identified, and he left his remaining weapons as a gift for whoever eventually found him.
Then he picked up his rifle. He loaded a single bullet, one he had deliberately saved for this exact moment, and penned his final, haunting words. They say it doesn't hurt.
Weeks passed in total silence. It wasn't until January of 1982 that his friends finally realized something was terribly wrong and requested a search. In early February, state troopers landed a ski-equipped plane at the frozen lake in deadly negative 46-degree weather. Inside a frost-covered tent, they found Carl's emaciated body alongside the remarkable 100-page diary detailing the entire tragedy. But perhaps the most crushing detail of all emerged months later, during an official coroner's inquest. The pilot of that plane back in August took the stand. He testified that he looked down, saw Carl casually waving a bright orange cloth, and then watched him give the exact all-okay hand signal. Operating strictly by the aviation rulebook, the pilot assumed there was no emergency. The system worked perfectly, but human communication had completely, fatally failed.
Carl McCunn's tragedy is a profound lesson on the unforgiving nature of the wild and the terrifying fragility of our best-laid plans. It wasn't just a lack of food that doomed him. It was a murky exit plan, a desire not to bother his family, a few discarded shotgun shells, and an accidental wave of the hand. It leaves you wondering what safety nets in your own life are secretly relying on unspoken assumptions. Subscribe to Hidden Reality for more incredible true stories and hidden realities from around the world.